So good morning, everybody. Before we go for a recap of what we had studied earlier, I hope that you remember that we had talked about different what is the necessity of conducting research with utmost integrity. We had talked about different types of research which can be considered as research misconduct. We had talked about authorship guidelines for what is the correct way of giving credit for authorship. Last time we had stopped at conflict of interest. So today we'll be taking up what conflict of interest means. If you recall in the previous class, and I told you that in a regular paper, a manuscript, you have in the body there are a lot of say lot of headings which have to be adhered to. So declaration of conflict of interest is one major concept which also has to be there in the manuscript when you publish your work. So you have to decide authorship right in the beginning. You have to declare the funding source. You have to acknowledge whoever has helped you in designing the manuscript. In addition to that, you also have to declare whether there was any conflict of interest or not. But before we talk about what this declaration is and why we have to disclose conflict of interest, we should know what conflict of interest is. So conflicts of interest comprise those any such thing which may have the capacity to remove objectivity. All right. So conflict of interest comprise those which may not be fully apparent and which may influence the judgment of an author. So any kind of situation that can influence your judgment as an author, as a reviewer, or an editor. All right. So anything, any kind of relationship, any kind of financial declarations or obligations that might impair your sense of fairness would be a conflict of interest. So there have been these conflicts of interest have been described as those which, when revealed later, would make the responsible reader feel misled or deceived. So I would give you an example of a conflict of interest. So for example, we have these physicians who treat us, right? Doctors who treat us. So they generally get influenced by the pharma companies in the form of financial incentives that they might be getting, or you may have a funding source. You may be you may have designed the study, or you may be pursuing the study in your lab, which has been funded by a particular pharmaceutical company or a particular individual, which may impair your judgment while designing the experiment, while reporting the results. So, for example, a pharma company or any other source has funded your research, and in spite of this funding is very necessary to you, right? You have to conduct your experiments from the funds that the person or the company has given you, but the results may not be in favor of the company. All right. Sometimes the results may not be in favor of the company. So if you're not able to decide for yourself, like whether you have to report the results in the fair process or whether will be reporting the results in favor of the company, that would be a conflict of interest. So you always have to declare this kind of conflict of interest wherever you feel that your sense of judgment, your sense of fairness is getting obliterated, right? Or it's getting impaired because of a relationship. So there are many kinds of conflicts of interest. They may be personal. Go to the third point. These conflicts of interest may be personal, commercial, political, academic, or financial. So conflict of interest can be of any type. It can be personal, like we may in a study we may have two people who are related to each other, right? Or there may be a person in the interview board who is related to you and is also conducting your interview. So that is a conflict of interest. So it's not like that person cannot sit in your interview, but the person has to declare the relationship right in the beginning of the interview so that the authorities can make some correction if they want to. All right. So disclosing this relationship is very important. So how many types of conflicts of interest are there? They may be personal, commercial, political, academic, and financial. Financial interests may include employment, okay? They may include employment, research funding, stock or share ownership, payment for lectures or travel, consultancies, and other factors. When an investigator, author, editor, or reviewer has a financial or personal interest or belief that could affect his or her objectivity or inappropriately influence his or her actions, it is a potential competing interest, right? So anything which is not allowing you to be fair in your judgment is a conflict of interest, right? For example, as a guide, if you send a paper to the publisher, right, and you suggest my name for as a reviewer, right, without telling them that this person is related to me. Maybe I was your mentor earlier, or maybe I was your teacher. I have taught you, but I'm not your guide. So you have given my name as a reviewer, right? And you are also you're very mindful of this fact that whenever the paper will come to me for review, I may not be fair enough because I may have a soft corner for your study, right? So it is a conflict of interest which you have not declared. So you may not have you do not have the obligation to declare it. I have the obligation to declare it because as a reviewer, I need to let the journal know that okay, I will not be able to review this paper because probably I will not be able to handle the results of the paper objectively. Okay. So do you understand what the conflict of interest is? Any such connection which has the potential of affecting your judgment, affecting your objectivity, affecting your the overall behavior with which you would assess the study would be called a conflict of interest. Is it clear? How many types of conflict of interest are there? Personal, any relationship, right? Relationship can be, mother-daughter, father-daughter, any kind of relationship. It need not be a blood relationship. It can be other relationships also, but they have to be declared. It's not a crime, right? If my father was a scientist, if I became a scientist, it's not a crime because we generally tend to have our role models in our family itself. But then it is obligatory for my father to declare, okay, I cannot be a part of this panel because this person is related to me. And generally, in good institutions, these forms are part of declaration. So before you agree to be part of a panel, you have to declare all these kinds of conflicts of interest, right? Okay. So I'll come to the examples of some of the conflicts of interest. So the most obvious competing interests are financial relationships, such as direct employment, stock ownership, grants, patents. Indirect would be honoraria that you may be getting, okay, to do a particular favor, right, or to suggest a particular kind of medicine. You know that the medicine is not required, but since you have been, given incentives to prescribe that particular medicine, so it is a conflict of interest because you're getting honoraria for prescribing something which is not required. Consultancies to sponsoring agencies, ownership and paid expert testimony. What is paid expert testimony? Paid expert testimony, for giving reviews, for example, or giving a review on some website, right? So the review should be honest, isn't it? Like for example, you're visiting a restaurant or you're visiting a hospital or any educational institution. So we expect that we are getting the honest reviews, isn't it? Like you have those 5 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, and we assume that the reviewing has been done in an honest manner because looking at those reviews, we make other people make a informed choice that whether they want to visit this particular hospital or whether they want to visit a particular restaurant, or they want to get, associated with a particular educational institution, isn't it? But then maybe somebody has fudged this thing, the review process. How can they fudge the review process? By paying people for giving positive reviews. So that is an unethical practice. It is one kind of commercial conflict of interest, right? So you should give a proper review. Like the review process should be honest enough. And if you're not capable of honesty, you have to declare the conflict of interest. Okay. So undeclared financial interests may seriously undermine your credibility. So what happens if you do not declare the conflict of interest? So it again affects your credibility. It affects the credibility of the institution who had paid you for giving testimonies. An investigator who owns stock in a, this is one example which can give you a better idea of what a conflict of interest is. An investigator who owns stock in a pharmaceutical company that is commissioning the research. Do you understand this situation? There is a research project in your lab that is under evaluation. You are kind of performing research on a particular product, and incidentally, that product, the funding you're getting from the same company whose product you are assessing. So, do you think you can be honest enough? Can we be honest? I mean, there is a chance that we can be, but there is also 50-50 chance that we may not be able to report adverse results, right? Because what is happening, you also have a stock, you have a stake in that pharmaceutical company. So if the pharmaceutical company will not do good, you are also, your downfall is also necessary, right? Because you may not get the right, the amount of money which you might have invested or you were expecting to get, right? So this is a potential, this is a common type of conflict of interest which we come across, like research studies funded by companies, and the investigators also have a stake in that particular company, right? So competing interests can also exist as a result of personal relationships, academic competition, and intellectual passion. An example might be a researcher who has a relative who works at the company, okay? A relative who works at a company whose product the researcher is evaluating, okay? So, I mean, there is a fine line in this thing. Right? It all depends upon how ethical you are, right? It's not always a negative thing that your relative is working in a company and you want to assess the product from their company. You may be two intelligent people, working in the same area, right? Isn't it? But then you have to be ethical enough. Means you do not have to mix professional and personal things, right? If the in the professional front the product is not giving the desired results, you have to report them as a professional, right? But before that, you have to declare conflict of interest. What is that conflict of interest? You have to declare to the company, okay, the product that I am evaluating, my relative is working in that particular company. So this is called as disclosure. It's very important. Disclosure of conflict of interest is very, very important. So later on, you cannot say that I did not have knowledge about this, like about what? About declaration or disclosure of conflict of interest. You have to disclose the relationship, the conflict of interest, whether it's personal, commercial, financial, any kind of conflict of interest has to be disclosed. Okay, and in good journals, they have a column, they have a form which you have to fill before you send your paper for publication, where they ask you whether you had any conflict of interest, right? So you either say yes or you either say no. If you do not have any conflict of interest, you declare that it's not there, and if you have it, you write in the column. Column is given what kind of conflict of interest is it exactly. A self-serving stake in the research results, for example, potential promotion, career advancement based on the outcomes. Right now, this is something which Again, is in the gray area because most of the publications or most of our research outcomes help us in getting career advancement, isn't it? It helps us build our API, right? So if we are, in the know-how of, what, if we know that okay, this result should not be reported so fast because we still need to check whether the result is authentic, right? So, for example, we were in the process of sending a manuscript, and we know that a particular set of result needs to be thoroughly checked, right? But because we were expecting the promotion, what did we do? We just sent the paper without thoroughly checking the result. But the author was mindful that okay, we still needed to do some more experiments. But because of his or her personal selfish reasons, the person did not work in the proper, unbiased manner. He created a bias for himself because he sent out a piece of study which he or she was doubtful about. Why did he or she do this? Because it was this particular paper might have been important for career advancement. So, being ethical does not come easy. You have to, sacrifice some things, and it's better to sacrifice those things rather than lose your credibility later on, right? So, personal beliefs that are in direct conflict with the topic he or she is researching. So, for example, we are researching something which does not adhere to our personal beliefs. Okay, we may not be objectively able to decide the outcome because we let our personal beliefs interfere with the final outcome, isn't it? So we have to declare that kind of conflict of interest also there. Okay, so a study may be designed in such a manner that it's in direct conflict with your ideology. So if you think that your personal ideology will not allow you to report the results properly, you should declare the conflict of interest. So you may have having the conflict of interest is not bad, but hiding that conflict of interest is unethical. So guide to declaration of competing interests. So full disclosure about a relationship that would constitute a competing interest should be reported to the institution's ethics group and to the journal editor to which a paper is submitted. So these days, the journal they themselves send us a form, so we don't have any other option. We have to declare our conflict of interest because the journal wants us to sign the declaration. Okay. Most publishers require disclosure in the form of a cover letter and or footnote in the manuscript. So most of the standard papers that you might be referring for your research, you will see that they have a footnote where there is a column for conflict of interest. So if the answer is generally none, and whenever it's yes, the conflict of interest is depicted at the footnote of the paper. So these days, most of the publishers require a document where we have to disclose conflict of interest. Full transparency always is the best course of action. Okay, so the bottom line is that being ethical is the only way. Being fully transparent is the best course of action because if you hide one thing, you have to cover up many other things too, right? So if you are misinterpreting something or reporting false information, then you have to create a whole lot of other data which would support that false data. So it's better to be transparent and better to be honest and ethical in your reporting. So this chart here tells you what kind of conflict of interest has to be declared. So the action is an undisclosed relationship that may pose a competing interest. So what is the action? This is a competing interest, isn't it? An undisclosed relationship that may pose a competing interest. So what is it? Neglecting to disclose a relationship with a person, or what have you done? What has the person done? He has neglected to report this. He or she did not disclose the conflict of interest. Is it unethical? Yes, it is unethical. Participants in the peer review and publication process must disclose relationships that could be viewed as potential competing interests, right? So if I get a paper from my peer, if I get a paper from my relative, if I get a paper from a student, who with whom I have published papers, I should immediately decline reviewing those papers. Okay. Uh, Okay. So what should you do when submitting a paper? State explicitly whether potential competing interests do or do not exist. Indicate this in the manuscript for single blind journals or the title page for double blind journals. Cover page should include whether you have given the name of the reviewers who are known to you. So even if you are not disclosing the reviewer, it's a duty of the reviewer to disclose this. So the onus is not on the author so much as it is on the reviewer or the editor to declare any kind of competing interest. Another conflict of interest is an undisclosed funding source that may pose a competing interest. So what have you done? What was the action that you had done? Neglecting to disclose the role of the study sponsors. So we always have a column in every paper. We have a column where we have to disclose the funding source. So why do you think this column is there? Why do we need to tell anybody where we got our funding from? Why do you think? I mean, it's necessary to tell the whole world what our source of funding was. Because obviously research needs a lot of funds, so we need to declare who, I mean, it's obligatory on us to tell, declare what the funding source was, whether we had been funded by the university itself, or whether we had some sponsors who had funded our research, or whether the research was funded by the government bodies. So this declaration has to be there. I'll come to that later on, so remind me at the end of the class. So neglecting to disclose the role of the study sponsors, if any, in the study design, in the collection, analysis and interpretation of data, in the writing of the report, and in the decision to submit the paper for publication. So funding source may influence your idea, right? They may influence, no, we don't want to send the paper to this particular journal. We should send it to some other journal because they may have a say in the final outcome of the paper. They may influence the other group in publishing your paper without much of a peer review. So that is again a competing interest. So is it unethical? Yes, undeclared financial conflicts are unethical. They may seriously undermine your credibility. So in most of the unethical practices, these practices are undermining our credibility and our standing in the research arena, isn't it? So nobody would believe our work if you are caught once, you just have to be you may be dishonest multiple times, which we should not be, but you just need one bad paper and it will clearly destroy your reputation. And nobody is going to believe your other studies. So it's better to take your time, go slowly, correct, do corrective measures to get the right kind of data, be authentic enough, go for rigorous data analysis so that all these loopholes are fixed right there in the lab, rather than sending the spurious bit of paper, data to the journals and then having to cover it up later on. And I, again reiterate that whatever we are sending, whatever we are publishing, it should add to the knowledge database, isn't it? It should create more knowledge. And this creation of knowledge should be new knowledge. It should not be false. It should be true knowledge on which others can build up their hypothesis, isn't it? So AMA, American Medical Association, emphasized that physicians should be mindful of the conflicting roles of investigators and clinicians, and of the financial conflicts of interest that arise from incentives to conduct trials and to recruit subjects. Now, subjects, who are these subjects? These are our human volunteers. So your human volunteers may not have agreed to, they might not have volunteered to be a part of the study. But what you did was you gave them incentives, monetary incentives to recruit them to the study. So that is again an unethical practice. Okay. So now you would say, how would I recruit the volunteers if I do not give them any incentive? So you have to educate them. You have to let them know that your contribution in a particular study is very, very important. Or we may give them some incentives, but that should not again impair our result. Okay. The outcome should not be false as a result of these incentives. Okay. So that is why, a huge debate is happening in the world regarding, there's a debate on whether incentivizing certain aspects of research has fostered unethical practices. So we are still in the debating phase where we are still analyzing whether incentivizing research or incentivizing certain aspects of research has led to real proliferation in the publication of papers, or whether it has led to unethical practice. I leave that question to you. I want the answers from you. Maybe you can do some bit of research on your own and find out whether there is some correlation between incentivizing research and proliferation of unethical practices. So find out on your own, and this would be your short survey or some short assignment which you can submit to me as a part of your homework kind of thing. And it will also give you an idea on your own. You can be able to decide whether the debate is in the right direction, or it's just a false brouhaha about all these things. Okay? We had talked about research conduct and integrity, but we can again go through it because research integrity constitutes adherence to rules, regulations, guidelines, and commonly accepted professional codes or norms of research with all honesty. When honesty is still the best policy. Okay, so it may not be in vogue so much, but at the end of the day, honesty is always the best policy. Honesty in your relationships, personal, professional, everywhere, commercial interests. So violation of the standard course of scholarly conduct and ethical behavior in professional scientific research is called as research misconduct. It is defined as fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in proposing, performing, or reviewing research, and in reporting research results. So, what proposing while you're designing, performing the research, or reviewing the research. So, research misconduct does not include honest error or difference of opinion. So, there may be some inadvertent mistake. We may have omitted a piece of data. It may have been an honest error, but then honest errors, we are all human. We can always make mistakes, and we learn from our mistakes, right? So honest errors would never be included into research misconduct, but then the board has to evaluate, your PI has to evaluate, or whatever is the institutional review board, they have to evaluate whether this particular error was an honest one, or it was already a planned, kind of fabrication. I had already talked about what fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism mean, so I will move forward because I have to take some other things. You please go through the case studies. I have shared this material. We had talked about plagiarism and what the penalties are in the previous class, if I remember correctly. We have talked about this thing, isn't it? Different levels of plagiarism. 10% minor similarities. It does not attract a penalty. Above 10 to 40, level 1. Level 2 is above 40 to 60, and level 3 is similarity above 60%. What are the reasons for plagiarism? The reasons of plagiarism, or mostly reasons for plagiarism are publish or perish mantra. Publish or perish mantra, because a lot of pressure is there on investigators to publish. They have to publish for career advancement. They have to publish to show good research output. So publish or perish mantra is one common driver for unethical practices. Unawareness of research integrity policies. Okay, so unawareness. Now you cannot say that you were not aware. Why can't you say? Because UGC has made it mandatory. The university has arranged classes for increasing your awareness about responsible conduct of research. You are well aware of what the penalties are, would be, right? So you cannot say that we were not aware, right? So now nobody can say that we were not aware. Not only university students, a lot of awareness programs have been conducted in other institutes too. Right? So unawareness is poor English proficiency. Attitudes towards plagiarism. So attitude, I had talked about this thing in the previous class, that sometimes we have a tendency to take our friend's assignment and submit it as our own. So that is also plagiarism, because you have not put in any effort, you have not thought about that problem, you just picked up a piece of work which your friend had written. So sometimes we, inculcate this behavior from our childhood, isn't it? From the schools. So we may not be, I mean, whenever we grow up, we do not think it as a, we think it as a normal practice, right? It's not an abnormal thing that we have done, copy somebody else's assignment and submit it as our own, because we have been doing it for a long time. So this practice has to be stopped from the schools itself. Maybe the child may not write an elaborate assignment, but at least we should encourage some original thoughts from the children in schools, so that this normalization of copying and pasting is stopped from the beginning. Right? We have to be original thinkers. We have to put in our mind into whatever problem we are assessing. Cultural values or lack thereof. You either, because we have normalized this practice of copying and pasting, so we may not think that it's a wrong practice which we have been doing for a, over a lifetime till now.
Parish mantra.
Perish, publish and perish mantra. Okay. Publish and perish mantra is, it's a very common driver, because you either have to publish your work or you will perish in the academic scenario, isn't it? For example, you are just due for a promotion and you do not have the required number of papers, because you were analyzing your data very thoroughly. You were replicating your experiments 3 times, and sometimes the experiments do not work as you want them to work, right? So you have to repeat your experiments multiple times to get the right set of data. So the speed with which you would publish may not be proportional to your efforts, right? So you would perish in the academic world, but then you should not be scared of that. You should be more concerned about your credibility. So maybe the promotion may be deferred by 6 months, but then you would have a good piece of data, good piece of paper to rely on. So the culture that we have in most of the countries is publish or perish mantra, because they either have to publish their work or they will perish. Nobody would know them. So you have a long, you are always in a what do you say, hurry to publish papers. So we should not be in a hurry, because the data should be very carefully assessed and discussed. it takes time. We should, I mean, the first thing that you have to learn is that research is not instant. Throughout your 3 or 4 years, you would be repeating your data and you may repeating your experiments, and you may not get success. So that is what research is all about. You have to be ready for more failures than success, but at the end of your research project, when you think that the research project is complete, you would have at least 2 or 3 sets of data which would add to the data network or knowledge, right? Your aim should be to create more knowledge, to make some substantial impact, rather than recycling and rehashing the old data which others have published. Okay, so be ready for a rigorous exercise as a part of your PhD journey. Okay, because you are scholars, you are I mean, this is a scholarship that you have undertaken. Enough. And institution's research is totally dependent upon how the research is being performed by its research scholars. Right? You are the ones who will be sitting on the bench or going out into the field. Your supervisor may not have so much time. So you are responsible for getting us the authentic set of data. So who is responsible to check plagiarism? So responsibility to check plagiarism is shared by all of us: journal editors, reviewers, heads of university departments, dean R&D, professional societies, individual scientists, and author. So, author should not be at the last. Author should be in the beginning, right? So authors have the main responsibility to check plagiarism. And then I had told you that there are a lot of forensic softwares which are available. There are softwares to check whether the text has been copied and pasted. I had talked about Authenticate, Drillbit, Goodbone, so many other softwares. And now we also have softwares which can also look for whether the pictures have been manipulated, whether the images have been manipulated, whether you have constructed 2 bits of pictures from different sources and constructed a picture which you have shown as your own. So a lot of forensic tools are available with the journal editors and reviewers who can check your histograms, they can check the images that you are publishing in your, which that you have sent for publication in your papers. Okay, and then we also live in the AI world. It can, artificial intelligence can collate lot of data. It can collate pictures from previous so many years, and any picture which would look similar uh, to your picture, maybe it will be a good tool to understand whether this picture was used previously or whether it's a new picture which was a part of this particular study. In your phones only you get, you in the junk folder you get, okay, these 2 pictures are similar. How is it able to do it? Don't we get this message in our phones? If these 2 pictures are duplicate, delete one of it, right? So similarly, the AI tools can collate data from multiple sources, and they can tell the reviewer or the editor that these 2 pictures look similar. So it is a red flag that the AI tool itself traces. There are a lot of tools to assess whether the data, whether the content is properly, has been properly screened on. So role of editors in checking plagiarism. So what is their role? On receiving review articles from individuals who have never published original research papers on the subject of the review, editors should verify the credentials of the individuals. So it's not being the first time author is always very difficult. So when you publish your first paper, it is always very difficult. For us also, when we publish our papers, the first paper is always difficult because we are trying to enter the field of research. We have to create our credibility. So when our paper goes for the first time, the rigor of review is very much, because what is happening on receiving review articles from individuals who have never published original research papers on the subject of the review, editors should verify the credentials of the individuals. So they are doing an extra step. They are assessing your credentials. So that is why it takes longer time for the first paper to get published. With original articles, it is however much more difficult, as there are at least 8,000 medical journals in the world, and many of these must receive thousands of papers a year. Okay, so it's not a foolproof process. That is why we are getting papers on retraction watch, which have somehow bypassed this rigorous review process, isn't it? It's not like, we have all the procedures are in place, but in spite of all these quality control procedures, we are still getting papers which are appearing on retraction watch, which have been marked for research misconduct. Right? So that means something is not working properly. Some step is getting what bypassed, right? So why is it getting bypassed? Because the quantum of papers that need to be reviewed is very high. We are publishing at a very, uh, not we, but across the world, people are publishing at a prolific speed. There has been proliferation of journals, there has been proliferation of research groups, isn't it? So the quantum of research papers that the journals are getting is very huge. So they may not get the subject experts on time. So that also compromises the quality control process. So that is why a lot of papers from good reputed journals like Science and Nature have appeared in retraction watch. They had to be retracted because a lot of misconduct was found in those papers. I hope you understand retraction. Retraction is removing the paper from literature, from all databases, because the data that was reported in that particular paper was not true. It was falsified or fabricated. Okay? Editors should become educators, that is to teach authors about standards in publishing and research to continuing education. So this is not something which you will learn in today's class. It's an ever-evolving process. The processes will change. Okay, next year you may have some other website which would, give you more idea about responsible conduct of research, isn't it? So procedure on suspicion of plagiarism. So whenever somebody is reported for falsification, plagiarism, or fabrication of results or research misconduct, we do not assume that that person has done this misconduct. Obviously, the person is innocent till he or she is proven guilty. Okay, so just merely accusing somebody of misconduct or falsifying data is not enough. A fair board would be set up, a committee would be set up who would evaluate whether the complaint is correct or not. So authors always have a chance to present their view and present their data. Okay, so you are innocent till you are proven guilty. So examination of allegation on ascertainment of plagiarism, a statement should be requested of authors. If no plausible explanation is given, submitted articles should be rejected, and reviewers, authors, supervisors, and their institutions should be notified. Okay. So the journal would ask for an explanation. So you have to give a response to that explanation, right? So sometimes they may have some misunderstanding in, they may not have understood your set of data, or you may not have given them adequate information. So they may want your original pictures, they may want a recording of your original data notebooks. That is why I was telling you that data recording is very important. It should be time-stamped. It should be, original pictures or original graphs, printouts should be taken out from the machine, which would have timestamp on it. Okay, right? And if you're going for field work, you should always document it by geotag pictures, so that there's no question about credibility of your data. Okay. I hope I am clear. So if no plausible explanation, if you are not able to convince the reviewers, so what will they do? What option do they have? Either they reject your paper because maybe it was not a huge error that you had committed. Maybe they would reject your paper, but if the misconduct is serious, they would inform your institution. Publishers should recall previously published articles and notify all relevant databases. So if somebody is a perpetual offender, right? If a group has published multiple papers where the data is questionable, okay, then what happens? All their previous published work also comes into question. So they may be asked to retract the previous papers too, after thorough examination, of course. Okay? The affected authors and journals should be informed. The following SOP is suggested for dealing with alleged cases of scientific misconduct. So if somebody has been accused of scientific misconduct, what is the standard operating procedure? This is the standard operating procedure. Complaint information can be entertained from identified individual. Okay, so we cannot make anonymous complaints. The complaints have to be identified. The person who is making the complaint should put his or her name in the letter or whatever form of complaint is there. The scientific misconduct is to be investigated by the Scientific Investigation Board. So institutional academic integrity panel is also another requirement for every kind of institution. Institutional academic integrity panel, IAIP. Other than that, scientific investigation board is a necessity. Every institution should have a scientific institution board. What are they empowered in? They are empowered in looking into the complaints and evaluating whether the complaint is authentic obviously based upon evidence. So the author would also get a chance to present his or her evidence. Okay. The cases of major and severe transgressions involving penalties such as, what are the penalties? Deferred promotion, deferred increments, reduction to lower stage, demotion, compulsory retirement, removal from service are to be dealt as per the established administrative. It depends upon the type of penalty, right? So the level of penalty, misconduct. Level of misconduct, because it's not whenever somebody is indulging in research misconduct, he or she is not harming the individual himself, right? He or she is also harming the institution, isn't it? Because we do not write our home address on papers, or do we? What do we write? Institutional address. Affiliation is always institutional. So the institutional is also getting hurt because of your misdemeanors, right? So you may not have any, responsibility towards yourself, but you have a huge responsibility towards the organization. So always keep it in mind that research misconduct should be avoided at all costs. And the papers should go through rigorous checks and balances, right? This we have discussed in detail. So similarities up to 10%, no penalties for minor similarities. Similarities above 10 to 40%. The person may be asked to withdraw manuscripts submitted for publication and shall not be allowed to publish any work for a minimum period of 1 year. Anybody who has similarity about 40 to 60% shall be asked to withdraw manuscript submitted for publication and shall not be allowed to publish any work for a minimum period of 1 year, shall be denied a right to one annual increment in case of an academician. They also shall not be allowed to be a supervisor to any MPhil and Ph.D. scholar for a period of 2 years. This should be enforced actually, because when we enforce these things, these penalties, if they are enforced, they will act as a great deterrent for all malpractices. Because the severity of penalty is directly proportional to the severity of misconduct. Level 3, similarity above 60% shall be asked to withdraw manuscript submitted for publication, shall not be allowed to publish any work for a minimum period of 3 years. Then another note, penalty on repeated plagiarism. So repeated offenders, so it's just not for plagiarism, it's for falsification too and fabrication. So repeat offenders shall be asked to withdraw manuscript, shall be punished for the plagiarism of one level higher than the lower level of what was required. So because this person has already been reprimanded, may already have been punished, but still the person was brave enough to commit the offense again. So the punishment, severity of the punishment would also be higher. Well, I should not say brave, I should say naive enough, right? Because there's no bravery in being dishonest. When 14 words are, okay, plagiarism and 14 words are taken together for some established core work, citation becomes essential. And also when the copied content reaches 40 words in accumulation, the fragment needs to be kept under inverted commas in italics, right? So you would put the reference accordingly, quote unquote, right? Authors are necessarily required to cite reference in case of any content adopted from anywhere other than the internet open sites. It's also that even in case of open site internet source, the copied contents, if found more than 30% in aggregate during plagiarism detection, the work shall not be considered for further proceedings. So in a nutshell, you do not have to copy and paste big long sentences. Try to rephrase in your own words. Write the entire article in your own words. Go through the papers. You can always summarize. That is what our language skills help us in, isn't it? We read a paper, we have to reproduce it in our own words. We had talked about redundant publications and salami slicing. I'll go to predatory journals, another unethical practice. So we have talked about dealing with misconduct, the penalties, how the misconduct has to be dealt with. So depending upon severity of the misconduct, the level of penalty would be directly proportional. This thing is important. I told you earlier too. Editors should not simply reject the papers that raise questions of misconduct. They are ethically obliged to pursue the cases, right? So they cannot, again, they cannot allow conflict of interest to, impair their judgment. There is ethical responsibility on these editors to pursue the cases, for, for or against, because the author may be innocent actually, right? So we have to give the author the chance to prove his or her innocence. So editor, depending upon seriousness of the misconduct, the editor must take all allegations and suspicions of misconduct seriously, but they must recognize that they do not usually have either the legal legitimacy or the means to conduct investigations in serious cases. So what do they do in the serious cases? They report it to the author's institution. The institution would have a IAP, the Institutional Academic Integrity Panel, or they may have a institutional scientific review board. So they would evaluate whether the misconduct has happened or not. So they do not have to pass the judgment on their own. They should write to the institution and let the institution investigate on their own, right? So sometimes the institutions also take a favorable view. So some other independent body should also review it. So if employers have a process for investigating accusations, as they are increasingly required to do, so you can see the proliferation of misconduct has happened lately. So all the institutions have these mechanisms. then the editors do not need to assemble the complete case. They will let the employers assemble the complete case with proper documentation. So in fact, most of the research institutions have a provision for having an ethics officer. So most of the research institutions in India and abroad, they have a particular post in the institutions which is called as ethics officer. The job of this ethics officer is to periodically monitor the data and the papers that are coming for review, even the projects, because sometimes the projects that we write to funding bodies, they have a document now where we have to declare whether the projects are original and whether we have used any similarity tool to detect, remove any kind of similarity with already existing projects. So we cannot plagiarize projects too. Is it clear? So plagiarism is not kosher for your PhD thesis. It's not kosher for publications. It's not acceptable anywhere, not even in your research projects. So, what is that? If the experts find no evidence of misconduct, the editorial process should proceed in the normal way. If presented with convincing evidence of serious misconduct, that where there is no employer to whom this can be referred and the authors are registered doctors, so you may have a misconduct which somebody has done who is not employed, is self-employed or is a private practitioner, then it should be referred to the General Medical Council or any other body, third regulatory body which can assess the misconduct. If editors are convinced that an employer has not conducted an adequate investigation of a serious accusation, in this scenario, what should they do? They may feel that the publication of a notice in the journal is warranted. Legal advice will be essential. So if the editors feel that whatever investigation has been done by the institution has not been fair enough, then they can put a notice on their journals regarding the paper and in the databases. Authors should be given the opportunity to respond to accusations of serious misconduct. If the misconduct is not so serious,
Can
then
you go back to previous slide?
sure.
This last bottom line, legal advice will be essential. What does it mean?
It means that I had said you joined the class late.
Yes.
I said in the beginning that the journal editors are not authorized to legally reject these studies. So they need to have some legal advice regarding what course of action or penalty they should give to the author.
What are the bodies which can give the legal advice in this context?
So there are multiple bodies, you have these research ethics boards and you have regulatory councils like ICMR, Government Medical Council and many other regulatory bodies which look at the authenticity of the data. So they should be taken, their advice should be sought. And obviously there would be many other regulatory, like for atomic energy, you have regulatory bodies. So that kind of body can be received, or whichever body is governing your ethics network. Like for example, we refer to IMSA guidelines and we refer to ICMR guidelines, COPE guidelines. So they are the best judges of what the penalties would be. So at every stage, we have to follow guidelines from these agencies. Almost there. Thank you for reminding. The editors may judge that it's not necessary to involve employers in less serious cases of misconduct, such as redundant publication, deception over authorship, or failure to declare conflict of interest. So they can write a letter to the authors, and the authors can send a clarification, and that should clear the miscommunication or the charges of misconduct. Sometimes the evidence may speak for itself, although it may be wise to appoint an independent expert. Editors should remember that accusations of even minor misconduct may have serious implications for the authors, and it may then be necessary to ask the employers to investigate. Authors should be given the opportunity. Every time the authors have the right to respond. Then we should also know about embezzlement of ideas. What is embezzlement of idea? Embezzlement of idea is claiming an idea to be one's own while it was obtained from privileged access. So privileged access would mean that as a reviewer of a paper or as a reviewer of a grant, I may have come across an unpublished piece of data or an unpublished idea which I was reviewing. Okay? So I may use this, I may claim that this idea is mine. So that is a embezzlement of idea. So during review of research grants, because when people send grants, they are generally not there's not a lot of data with the investigators to support that because they are just starting out the study and they have sent out the idea to a body, a government body or a non-governmental organization. So as a reviewer, it is unethical on the part of the reviewer to embezzle that idea or share that idea with some other group. What happens? Your grant may be rejected, but some other competing person may write a grant on the same idea because the reviewer had a privileged access to your grant proposal. Are you getting my point? So embezzlement of ideas would be claiming an idea as your own, presenting it as your own, which you had gained by privileged access. While reviewing manuscripts, while reviewing grant proposals, or through participation in lectures and personal discussions and earlier publications, but not citing them. Okay? So we may have a discussion in the class or in some setting where we were discussing a grant proposal, right? So what somebody may do is present that particular idea which was floated by somebody else as their own. So that would be embezzlement of ideas. This also includes acts wherein ideas of others are presented as one's own thought by slightly changing words, phrases, and illustrations. Fraud, deliberate suppression of previous work in publications and inappropriately claim originality and or avoiding quoting previous publications. So fraud, everybody is aware of. Consequences we have talked about. These are some examples where the fabricators were severely punished. So this particular gentleman, Sean, was stripped of his doctorate degree by the University of Constance after a committee formed by Bell Labs found him guilty of fabrication related to research done during his employment there. So this gentleman, there were a number of papers in which he had not reported original data. Then there was a very important case. I want to show you that case. We'll go back to these pictures later on. Anyways, I think that is at the end of my lecture. So there was this case of stem cell researchers. It was a very highly celebrated, what do you say, research breakthrough. Like when a Korean group had reported for the first time that they have created embryonic stem cells. Okay, so it was a research breakthrough in the stem cell biology. But later on, it was found that the entire story was fabricated. So the person lost his reputation and he lost the entire. This paper was published in Nature or Science. It was a very prominent study at that point of time. But they were not able to furnish data. They were not able to furnish cell lines which they had claimed to uh, have designed or proliferated. So they did not have the original data recording. They did not have the cell lines which they had claimed to have designed and stored. So they were not found in possession of the cell lines. So entire study was scrapped, the paper was retracted, the person was removed from service from the South Korean Institute. So then you should also be aware of these journals which are called as predatory journals. What are predatory journals? Now we should not be only we should not only beware of predatory journals. We should also beware of predatory conferences. We should beware of predatory book editorialship. Okay? So there are a lot of companies which solicit you to be the authors. They solicit you to be, speakers in a particular conference as part of organizing committee in the particular conference. But what are they basically? They are just there to mint money, just like scamsters. Okay, so predatory journals are run by scamsters. Why are they called as predatory? As the name indicates, they predate on the prey. And who is their prey? Gullible people like us who may be in requirement of a publication. So we should not become the praise. Predatory journals are open access journals that publish articles online with little or no peer review. So they actually they do not have any peer review. You send them a paper today, tomorrow it will be published. You may not have right kind of data. You may have put somebody else's picture. They don't care about it. They just need their money because most of them are paid to. They exist to publish scholarly journals, articles for authors who require publications for their curricular writing. Predatory journals profit from author fees. So most of these predatory journals have what? They are paid journals. So there are also many good journals who require article processing charges, but then they follow a rigorous peer review process. They send the papers to multiple reviewers, and only when the reviewers give a positive report, then only they will publish your paper, and you may be required to give some article processing charges. Okay, but these predatory journals they are only interested in the author fees. They do not care about the quality of the paper. Numerous journals appeared throughout the early 2000s promising quick publication, high acceptance rate, and low author fees. So any journal which has a very high acceptance rate, it should be a red flag for you, right? For example, you do not know whether a journal is predatory or not. This is a red flag. Any publication house which has a high acceptance rate should be considered as predatory. It's estimated, okay, how to identify a predatory journal. So some have similar names to established, respected journals and sometimes falsely claim to have well-known experts on their editorial boards. Their websites are sometimes unprofessional. So now this thing is not an indicator because now their websites are highly professional, more professional than the professional journals, right? Right. So the second point does not now apply to them, but then the first one applies because they have similar names. So, for example, Nature is considered to be a good paper. So they might have Nature in capital letters and Nature Journal. They may have added a prefix or a suffix to the reputed journal name. They have high acceptance rates of submitted articles and quick publication times. So as I told you, in a day or in 24 hours, you will get your acceptance. So in 24 hours, who can review your paper? Right? Who will be able to review? It will take more than 24 hours to find a reviewer, isn't it? There's often no mention of author fees until after an article is accepted. So believe me, they would hound you. It's just like, it's like a debt you have to pay them, right? Because the moment they accept your paper, they would, inundate you with mails and calls so that you can pay their fees. Entire publishing companies have bought up other publishing companies and produced almost entirely predatory journals. For example, Omics Group. Omics Utop is a established predatory group of publishing house which deals in what? What? Publishing journals and conferences. So they used to hold conferences and then they used to solicit people to be a part of their organizing team, as part of their speakers, editorial team, so on and so forth. All right. Then this gentleman, Jeffrey Beal, did a good job. Beal created a list of journals, which we know as the Beal's list. Jeffrey Beal, what did he do? He created a list of journals, which they call as Beal list. And what does this Beal's list contain? It contains journals which have the potential, possible, or probability to become a predatory journal. So he essentially created a list of journals where all the predatory journals have been uh, chronicled. So what you should do before going for publication, you should check the Beal's list, because this is the list of journals where you do not want to send your paper. So do you want to send your paper to the journals which are in the Beal's list or which are not on the Beal's list? Which are not on the Beal's list, because Beal's list consists of papers which are predatory in nature. All right?
What is the repercussion, ma'am, if we publish in this predatory journals?
Your paper would be a piece, piece which would not be useful to you. Maybe you are publishing the paper to get your Ph.D. or maybe you are publishing the paper to disseminate your work. It's not going to the right audience. Who would read from a predatory journal? So your work is not reaching the right audience, and this paper would also not be considered as a quality paper because it has been published in a predatory journal. So we in Integral University, you are required to publish your papers in Scopus Index, Web of Science Index, and UGC Care journals. But make sure that the UGC Care journal that you might have to choose should not be in the Beal's list. So always try to publish your work in Scopus Index and preferentially in Web of Science Index paper indexing. Then we will talk about Retraction Watch. So again, I told you about Retraction Watch. Retraction Watch is a database where all the papers that have been retracted from the research database have been collated. And the reasons for retraction are also well documented. What does Retraction Watch tell you? It gives you two indicators. It tells you about all those groups whose papers you do not have to cite, okay, whose research you do not have to follow for your research, and it also gives you an indication of how prevalent research misconduct is. So Retraction Watch is a website which collates all the papers which have been retracted from the research databases and publishing databases on the basis of research misconduct. Okay? Because they have been found to have fabricated or falsified their data or plagiarized. Okay? Then this BIOS RX14 is a website where you can send your papers before publication. So it's an online review, peer review portal. So you can send your paper to this website. It will be online for some time. Your peers can review your study, can give you suggestions, and you can make your, through a rigorous review process, you can improve your paper and then send the paper for publication to an actual publishing house. So it's a free publication review portal.
Can the papers can be stolen from?
No, if it's on BIOS review, nobody has the right to steal it. Yes, I am about to read. Then we have PubPeer. Thank you for reminding. We have PubPeer. PubPeer is a website that allows users to discuss and review scientific research after publication. So BIOS RX is pre-publication, PubPeer is after publication. So once you have published, so it's not like you have published your work and you can forget about it. There are agencies, there are individuals who are reviewing your work even after publishing. So PubPeer is a website that allows users to discuss and review scientific research after publication.
It's only for biology.
No, no, it's for all, not for biology only. So all these things are not for biology only, they are for all domains. This site has served as a whistleblowing platform in that it highlighted shortcomings in severe high-profile papers, in some cases leading to retractions and to accusations of scientific fraud, as noted by Retraction Watch. So contrary to most platforms, it allows anonymous post-publication.
Then who is responsible to gather all this information?
So these are individuals who have a very high, I must say, high level of ethics and moral compass, because they are doing this without any, till now they were doing it without any monetary incentives. So three or four individuals had come together, and since it was not, it was causing them distress that lot of data in the database is not authentic, they decided to review papers on the, to check whether the data is authentic enough or not.
So post publications we are getting the review.
Yes.
Then how we are getting that feedbacks, that who is reviewed my papers, and
No,
how
no,
we get that? In the post publication review.
Right.
But here in the post publications,
Yes.
but we are supposed to that once we publish the paper.
Oh,
we
yeah.
are,
Yes. Go ahead.
yeah.
I'm listening to your question.
Yeah, share questions we are for it.
So post-publication review is after your paper has been published. Okay, so for example, your paper has been published and a set of data has been found to be questionable. So this PubPeer helps us in understanding whether the original review process was correct or not. So this is a post-publication review process which these PubPeer individuals are doing to check whether your published paper was an authentic piece of data or not. Okay? So it's after, it will not affect, I mean, your paper has already been published.
Yeah.
So it will only affect your or somebody else's credibility, because whatever you have published was not true enough. It was inauthentic data. So PubPeer is reviewing random papers in the research database, and they are reviewing it on the basis of authenticity of data. So they have their tools, they have access to all these forensic tools, and they have red flag lot of what do you say, prolific uh, publishers. So big groups, you go through we can have a discussion on, separate discussion on this. You go through Retraction Watch, you go through PubPeer, and you'll find that leaders in the research area have been implicated in these websites. And there is authentic documentation of conducting the scientific misconduct. So paper has been published. These individuals are only checking whether the publication process was the right kind of ethics were adhered to or not.
After publication, if it is found that it's not up to and
Then I told you that the editors, the person would be reported to the editors. The editor
author
can
will be
the author will be reported to the editor. Whoever was handling the paper at that point of
like the
time.
penalty and everything.
Yes, the penalty would come only if you are not able, if the author is not able to justify. Yes.
And if suppose the fabricators and everything being detected,
Yes.
then what this is being
Then if the fabrication has been detected, so depending upon what the level of misconduct was, they
And
would
the
either,
penalty will
yeah,
go
the penalty
according.
will be according to that. So they may want you to remove that particular piece of data. So it may have been, small
Either it can be
fabrication,
skipped.
or they can retract the entire paper from database. And if the offense has been detected multiple times, then
And
all your
suppose it is within the whole article in between the data, then it can be skipped also.
no, it will
That
not be
particular.
skipped. It will not be skipped. It will not. You have to remove that.
The entire.
Entire. And maybe your previous papers may also be retracted from the publication database. So, I mean, they are like we have ethical hackers, right? Similarly, we have these third-party people who are doing this work without for no money, just to keep the authenticity of the data intact. They are doing this work. So Retraction Watch, PubPeer, Biox Review, they are some not companies, they are group of individuals.
वो जो वेबसाइट्स होते हैं
जी
तो दैट ऑलवेज टेल अबाउट द प्लेगरिज्म ना मैम दे आर नॉट टेलिंग कि मतलब हाउ योर डेटा हैज बीन फैब्रिकेटेड और
No, they will not tell you. You would know whether you have fabricated your data or not.
they just suggest कि yes your plagiarism is इतना परसेंट है ना
हाँ नहीं तो बट वो तो आपको पता है ना कि आपने जो डेटा लिया है वो फैब्रिकेटेड है कि नहीं. वो तो रिव्यूअर के पास ऐसा कोई सॉफ्टवेयर होना चाहिए ना कि हमारा जो डेटा है रिव्यूअर के पास होना चाहिए. आपके पास नहीं होने की जरूरत है बिकॉज अगर आप ओरिजिनली if you are generating original data, you know that you have not fabricated the data, isn't it? If you have made a graph or designed a image, you know that you have used original image, right? The software needs to be with the reviewers, and they have it. They have access to it. So I would suggest that you go through this presentation. This was the fallen idol I was talking about, Dr. Huang Hu Suk. And I would suggest that you watch this movie called Fugitive. And there is one series on Netflix right now which talks about, the name of this series is Bad Surgeon. Bad Surgeon. All right, Bad Surgeon. So these two movies would give you a good idea about what ethics are and how you have to maintain
and this one
research integrity. Just a minute. Hello. Hello. Achha, just a minute. I'm in the middle of a class. I'm just reading. All right, yeah. Of course. But I would suggest that you do the reading on your own for all responsible scholars. So I'll send you some reading material also. So before I send the presentation, I'll send you some reading material. Go through the reading material on your own. Get into the habit of reading, right? And then the presentation will be quite useful. Where is the attendance? You had a question regarding single blind test.
Every day we are searching the where is the class. How we come to know that where we are? You are.
Yeah, even I am.
Past half an hour we are.
Even I am questioning.
It can be sent in the group, I think that is better. Ma'am, if your number can be added
Can
in
be
the
coordinated for all of us.
बताया था ना उन्होंने आपको नहीं बताया बताइए 91
And how can we will share this material to all of us?
I think if it
I'll
is.
send it through email and I'll put it on the book.
Ma'am, you are there.
PhD course
Yeah. Ma'am, you give.
Ma'am, are we in the group that I am group?
No,
Ma'am,
ma'am is not there. I will add.
add my name also.
I think you're also.
I am a member of that, so that we can get the material. But
I think we can now send another invite. Yes, no, ma'am.
ma'am, just please tell your number. Ma'am, please tell. One more communication. Not this